Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Sunday Zoom meeting and another podcast episode. If you're listening to the podcast or watching on YouTube, you can find out more about the podcast, you can listen to the podcast. You can find out about our online community, getting involved with these meetings, paid private mentoring with myself if it interests you on the website. And it's www.acimwithkeith.com. Right, let's get on with the meeting today. Let's do a quick revision. Lesson number one. Nothing I see means anything at all. So this is reminding us that you are the mind that is projecting the entire world, not you, the person. That's one of the things you're projecting. You are the mind that is projecting everything. So there's nothing happening here. There's no life here. There's nothing that has meaning here in the world. It is merely a projection of one mind. So nothing you see in your projection of the world means anything at all. It doesn't have any meaning. It is emptiness dancing. Nothing means anything. It's lesson number one. Lesson number two. I have given everything I see all the meaning it has for me. So all of this is emptiness dancing. It means absolutely zip. It has no meaning whatsoever. It doesn't matter what the images are. They don't mean anything. Okay. But each localization of the mind that is dreaming the entire world has made up a meaning for all of the meaningless images. And by that meaning lives as an imaginary separate self in a private world made out of the meaning that's made up for images that have no meaning. So that's the mindless state. Lesson number four. These thoughts in my mind do not mean anything. So nothing I see means anything. These thoughts do not mean anything. They're not your real thoughts. Lesson 52 says, I have no private thoughts, but it's only private thoughts of which I am aware. What can they mean? They do not exist, and they mean nothing. In lesson four, it says the good ones, in inverted brackets, because there's not really any good thoughts. The good ones are but shadows of what lies beyond, and shadows make sight difficult. The bad ones are blocks to sight and make seeing impossible. You do not want either. Okay, you want no thoughts. So nothing in the world means anything. Whatever you think it means, you made that up. So you can continue to believe that you are an imaginary separate self in your own private world, defined by what you've decided it's defined by. And that's mindlessness. Now, one of the criticisms A Course in Miracles gets is that that's nihilism. Nothing has any meaning whatsoever, is nihilism. And that's kind of true. It's kind of true that that's nihilism, which the ego can't stand. The ego is abhorred by that, um, because the ego is sustained by seeking the comfort of the body and the mind's need to know, to have meaning, to know meaning. So the ego, the imaginary separate self, is sustained by the desire for the body's comfort and the mind's need to know. So if we're being told, listen, there's thoughts happening in your mind, but they don't exist and they don't mean anything. And yes, there's a world apparently happening, but it has no meaning. That is nihilism. Except that purpose gives meaning. And again, the ego's purpose is that you continue to believe yourself a ghost inside a body, surrounded by other ghosts inside bodies, in a world that you think has meaning. And that keeps you away from the truth in your mind, keeps you distracted. So that's the purpose of the ego for the world, which means nothing. The Holy Spirit has a different purpose for the world that means nothing. And that is remembering who you are, awakening from the dream of individuality, from the dream of separateness to the truth of who you are, which is the truth of everyone. It's the Holy Spirit's purpose for everything. So all these images that mean nothing, everything you think they mean, you throw that away because they don't mean that at all. They have no meaning. Okay. And in the real world, you will understand that they have no meaning. And that's salvation. But until then, because you think they have a meaning, you need an alternative way of looking at them. And the alternative way of looking at the images that mean nothing is that they are solely for the purpose of awakening from the dream of separateness, that you're an ego, through the process of forgiveness or the miracle. And this is where the workbook is so important. So many people come across A Course in Miracles and it's talking about forgiveness and it's talking about how you feel better. And then people are asking questions going, well, how do I feel better about what my husband did to me? How do I feel better about the death of my child? How do I feel better about the sickness of my body? You see, and the answer is, well, you have to shift its purpose. You've decided that the condition of the body means that it's sick. And because I think I'm a body, I am sick. Okay, that's what you have to undo. You have to throw that out. You think what my husband was a body, was a separate self, a ghost in a body, something other than what I am, something separate from me. But that's not true. That's all made up. So we replace all of what we have made up, which the Course calls chaos, clashing dreams. Can't remember what chapter it talks about clashing dreams. But ultimately, each localization of the only mind that's here within its dream has a different meaning for the same images that's being seen from every localization and lives in a completely different world, private world, as the Course calls it, based on meanings that are made up for something that has no meaning. So our task with A Course in Miracles is that we shift the purpose of everything. It doesn't mean anything except that when I look at this meaningless image, this ink blot test that means nothing, and I'm seeing it at what I want to see in it, what comes up in my mind is already in my mind, and the meaningless world is showing it to me. So I can now sit in the middle of the sin, guilt, and fear in my mind without judging it, without telling myself stories about it, without projection, without saying this discomfort is here because of what my body did or someone did to my body or what my body did to someone else's body or because of what the world did. No, that's nonsense. Those are thoughts that don't mean anything. That is purely projection to protect guilt. Because if there's no guilt, there's no me as a separate self. Guilt is the proof that I've brought down heaven and therefore do in fact exist as a separate entity from God and from everyone else. So our task is to shift the purpose of everything. It has one meaning. It is solely for this formula of forgiveness that brings me home to the truth of myself and undoes made up sin, guilt, and fear in my mind. That's the only purpose the world has. So nothing in the world is now good or bad, right or wrong, sick or well. Nothing in the world should be happening or shouldn't be happening. Everything is exactly as it should be. Because it has only one purpose, which is for me to undo my misidentification as a separate self and awaken to the capital S self that's the truth of everyone that's here. Okay, so I guess that's what gets the Course of Miracles slightly off the hook with the nihilism accusation is that purpose gives meaning. But I want to be very clear. The world doesn't mean anything. Thoughts don't mean anything. And so Course of Miracles is saying you don't want to get involved with either of them. You don't want to seek your identity in the world or in thoughts. And you don't want to think the answer to your happiness or the end of your pain is in the world or in thoughts. It's not in either. And so the Course acknowledges this because if nothing means anything, if none of your fancy thoughts in your mind, not even the holy ones, mean anything, if the world doesn't mean anything, that's a very bad thing for the separate self. That's a very bad thing for the individual. And here's what the Course says about that. So if you try and understand this as the self you imagine yourself to be, the lacking, needing, wanting, grasping, separate self that thinks it has a past and a future and thinks it's different from everyone else. If you try and understand what the Course in Miracles is saying from that perspective, that would bring despair, hopelessness. And A Course in Miracles says, good. Because now you're ready for the other way. Let's take a quote. This is from chapter 31, section 4, paragraph 1. There is a tendency to think the world can offer consolation and escape from problems. That is its purpose to keep. Why should this be? Because it is a place where choice among illusions seems to be the only choice. Illusions that mean nothing at that. And you are in control of outcomes of your choosing. Thus, you think within the narrow band from birth to death, a little time is given you to use for you alone. A time when everyone conflicts with you, but you can choose which road will lead you out of conflict and away from difficulties that concern you not. Yet they are your concern. You've made them all up. How then can you escape from them by leaving them behind? What would go with you, you will take with you whatever road you choose to walk along. So no matter what road you take, you're taking the delusion that you're a separate self with you. You bring the problem with you onto every road, desperately trying to make the problem something different than it is. Real choice is no illusion. But the world has none to offer. There's no real choice in the world whatsoever. All its roads but lead to disappointment, nothingness, and death. I don't care how happy you are with your family. Lots of people have to experience the pain of the death of a child. I don't care how happy you are in your marriage. Someone's going to die. Someone's going to cheat on someone. Someone's going to fall out of love with someone. Someone's going to end up in jail, disgrace, whatever. The world has no real choice to offer. All its roads but lead to disappointment, nothingness, and death. There is no choice in its alternatives. See, if you stay involved with the world, you think you're a separate self that will die. That's a total delusion. You're not a separate self. You can't be sick and you can't die. But as long as you keep the separate self delusion and think you can fix the problem of the lacking, needing, wanting separate self that's in such pain and lack and need, and you're off amongst illusions that mean nothing, thinking you can find an answer to your salvation there, that just around the corner something's going to be your deliverance, something's going to make the pain stop. All that low level angst, dis-ease, discomfort that's always there, that restlessness that's always there in your mind. Something around the corner is going to bring that to an end. And it never does. So there is no choice in its alternatives. One is as useless as the other. Seek not escape from problems here. The world was made that problems could not be escaped. Be not deceived by all the different names its roads are given. Success, being a good person, being well thought of, being a good parent, being a good friend, being a good child, having enough money, sharing money. Call the roads whatever you want. They're all the same. They have but one end: death. All things change, all things end. Everything turns to ashes in your mouth in the end, in the world that you've made. Body will fall apart. Be not deceived by all the different names its roads are given. They have but one end, and each is but the means to gain that end, death. For it is here that all roads will end. However differently they seem to start, however differently they seem to go, their end is certain. For there is no choice among them. All of them will lead to death. Or at least the belief that you die. You can't die. What dies isn't you. It's your imagination. On some, you travel gaily for a while before the bleakness enters. Everything turns to crap in the end. And on some, the thorns are felt at once. The choice is not what will the ending be, but when it comes. No, but when it comes. Sorry. There is no choice where every end is sure. Perhaps you would prefer to try them all before you really learn that they are one. The roads this world can offer seem to be quite large in number, but the time must come when everyone begins to see how like they are to one another. Being single, being in a relationship, being on your own, being surrounded with people, being thin, being large, being liked, being disliked. Having friends, having none, having health, having none. They're all the same. And here's a great line. Men have died on seeing this because they saw no way except the pathways offered by the world. And learning they led nowhere, lost their hope. And yet this was the time they could have learned their greatest lesson. All must reach this point and go beyond it. Only here do we reach the point of readiness for the other way. Only here are we ready for the genuine invitation to the Holy Spirit that says, I've been wrong about everything. I don't know what happiness is. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make all the discomfort and self-hatred and self-loathing and lack and need and want and hate. I don't know how. I don't know what the answer is. I know it's not in the world. I've tried everything. Nothing took away the restlessness. Nothing brought me lasting peace. I thought I wanted a relationship and then I sabotaged it. I thought money would make me happy and I'm miserable. almost reach this point and go beyond it. It is true indeed, there is no choice at all within the world. So nothing that happens out there is going to bring you the peace that you long for. Nothing. It's a moving goalpost. It's a lie. But this is not the lesson itself. The lesson has a purpose. And in this, you come to understand what it is for. Now you're ready to have the world be for nothing else other than a device that teaches you through forgiveness to remember the truth of who you are, which is the only happiness you'll ever find. It's for nothing else. In chapter 29, section 7, paragraph 1, seek not outside yourself, for all your pain comes simply from a futile search for what you want, insisting where it must be found. The body has to get healthier. People have to have more time for me. I've got to get my reputation back. I've got to be more successful. I have to have more money. I have to have my housing situation sorted out. That family situation and problem needs to go away. It's not there. You've been saying that from 4 or 5 years old up until today years old, and you still have that restlessness in you. You still have that angst that you try to medicate with television and gossip and finding fault with other people and distracting yourself from your pain and the emptiness of everything. Seek not outside yourself, for all your pain comes simply from a futile search for what you want, insisting where it must be found. It's out there. It's in this ideal. What if it's not there? Do you prefer that you be right? Keep chasing the moving goalpost until you imagine you die? Or happy? Be you glad that you are told where happiness abides and seek no longer elsewhere? You will fail. But it is given you to know the truth and not to seek for it outside yourself. So that's what the Course in Miracles wants us to see and stop fooling ourselves. You're absolutely miserable. You're absolutely miserable. And unconsciously, you've sent out the hungry dogs of fear going, for the love of God, bring me back something I can blame for this. My ex, the family tragedy, what the neighbor did to the dog, whatever. You're miserable. You're desperately trying to find things to blame, and you're looking for something that will medicate you, that will take all this dissatisfaction and discomfort and disease away. And there's nothing. All is illusion. All will turn to ashes in your mouth. You're welcome. That's why A Course in Miracles says tolerance for pain may be high, but it's not without limit. Eventually, everyone comes to see that there must be another way. So the way you've been living is out there fighting with the world, trying to force it to be things you think will make you happy, and trying to avoid things in the world that you think might take the tiny little bit of happiness you have off you. Scratching around in the dirt, looking for crumbs. And A Course in Miracles says, well, have you suffered enough yet? Are you ready to stop looking for answers outside of you? including spiritual paths, still seeking, it's still looking. The fact is, this is already the real world. This is the real world where all is healed and holy and one already. The wholeness that reflects heaven is already here in everything, exactly as it is right now. And that's hidden underneath all the meanings you've made up for the world. All the judgments you've laid on it. Underneath that is the purpose of all the universe, which is forgiveness. So the real world's already here. This is everything here right now, exactly as it is wholeness, is oneness, is peace, is the reflection of heaven's light right now. Exactly as it is. But the imaginary separate self rejects that. This is not wholeness. I need to do something. I need to tweak things. This is not wholeness. I need to try and create wholeness with illusions. Doesn't work. Because this is already wholeness exactly as it is. Not for the imaginary separate self, the egoic identity, the self you made that's not the Son of God. Not for the self concept. The self concept, by its very nature, is lacking and in pain. And it's desperately trying to solve the problem of itself. And it will always do that. But you're not a separate self. You're not an ego. You're not an ego. You think you are because you think that the thoughts in your mind mean something. But lesson four said, but they don't mean anything. You don't want them. You don't want good ones. You don't want bad ones. You don't want to get involved with any thoughts. The minute you get involved with thoughts, you misperceive yourself. Your suffering is terrible and you miss the wholeness that's already here. And you start trying to tweak illusions to take away your pain. And it doesn't work. Because the only happiness you'll ever know is the truth of who you are. You cannot be happy as an illusion of yourself. And if you think wholeness is not already here, it's just because you think you're an individual. This isn't whole for an individual. This isn't whole for a separate self. But this is wholeness right now. Course in Miracles says the forms the broken pieces seem to take mean nothing. This is all emptiness dancing. But the whole is in each one. One, capital S self. The whole is in each one, and every aspect of the Son of God, me, everyone here, is just the same as every other part. Okay, the separate self you think you are, it doesn't mean anything. It's just delusion. It's just a false identity made out of thoughts and the delusion someone's thinking them. There's nobody thinking them, and they're not you, and they don't mean anything. You're not a separate self. You are the one self that's appearing as everything and everyone. That's what you are. That's the real world. That's what's already here. But there is a belief in separateness. There's a belief in an egoic identity. It's not true. And no one's holding that belief because you already are the light of the world, the light that's appearing as everything. That's already true. But within the appearances, there's the appearance of thoughts that there's a separate self here, but there's not. Of Course in Miracles says, let me not forget my small s self is nothing, but my capital S self is all. It's literally all. It's literally all. Everywhere you look is the self that you are. Unless you're looking through the filter of an imaginary separate self who looks out and misses wholeness and sees an imaginary carved up world divided into good and bad and right and wrong, and I need to fight this and I need to chase this and I need to. It's delusion. And there's no happiness in it. None. Now, obviously, if you quite like being a separate self, forget what I just said because you'll go mad. When will you be ready to admit that it's not working? That the pain doesn't end, that the seeking never stops, that the discomfort is always here, that there's no lasting happiness, that your hatred for yourself and others never ends. Can't see wholeness anywhere in the world, even though the world is made out of it. When will you be ready for the other way? And we talked about the other way last week. Let's return back to that particular quote. The voice of the Holy Spirit, which is silence and stillness, the voice of the Holy Spirit does not command because it is incapable of arrogance. So that's in your mind, this silence and stillness of the Holy Spirit. Does not command because it is incapable of arrogance, does not demand because it does not seek control, does not overcome because it does not attack, it merely reminds. It is compelling only because of what it reminds you of. It brings to your mind the other way, remaining quiet, even in the midst of the turmoil you may make. So we talked about this last week. The other way is that, listen, there's a world, doesn't mean anything, but temporarily we're giving it the purpose of forgiveness. There is thoughts in your mind, they don't mean anything either. And the other way is to allow the world, allow thoughts to thought, allow emotions to emote, allow the egoic mind to do what it's doing. And you remain still and quiet, even in the midst of the turmoil. And it will undo all the turmoil and you'll remember what you are as the light of the world. It's a process. You escape the matrix, which is made out of thoughts. So you learn how to be the still, alert, witness, non-judgmental observer to the nonsense the mind is doing. And to the sin, guilt, and fear that's coming up in you as the meaningless world whirls. You make your stand as this stillness and this quiet in the midst of whatever's going on. You allow all things to be exactly as they are. And in this non-judgment, non-interference, non-doing, you remember what you are, and the darkness all begins dissolving. And the illusion starts falling apart, the illusion of separateness. Course in Miracles says, through him you learn how to forgive the self you think you made, the one that's separate and suffering and needing and wanting. To forgive the self you think you made and let it disappear. And as it dissolves, because it's just an idea, it's just a thought, it's not a fact. As it dissolves, the real world tells you of itself. That already one light, one holiness, one wholeness is appearing as everything. And you are that. And it's appearing as war, and it's appearing as peace, and it's appearing as love, and it's appearing as hate, and it's appearing as religion, and it's appearing as politics, and it's appearing as thoughts and feelings and stories. Wholeness is already appearing as your desire for wholeness. The very desire for wholeness is made out of the wholeness that you already are. The very desire to undo the ego is made out of the wholeness you already are, where there's no ego. You already are that. Except you get involved with thoughts and think you're something that doesn't exist, a separate self, apart from all that is, but you're not. So the other way is coming home to the quiet center. That's the truth of who you are. And it's outside of thoughts. It doesn't mean there can't be any thoughts. It means you recognize there's no identity in them. It's just what's apparently happening. It's not you. So the other way is not getting involved with chasing for happiness and wholeness in the world. It's not seeking and resisting, grasping and grievances, special love and special hate. It's not that. That's the way that didn't work. So the other way is finding the truth of who you are, the peace and equanimity that's always here in this moment, in the midst of all the other stuff. And all you have to do is do nothing. It's a cessation of doing. That's why forgiveness is still, and it quietly does nothing. It looks and waits and judges not. No resistance, non-interference, non-doing, non-judgment. So the world is worlding, thoughts are thoughting, emotions are emoting, and I go, great. All this is to remember who I am. That's its only meaning. So let me do nothing. In the midst of all of this, turmoil I make. Let me do nothing. Let me witness all of this with no judgment of it, fighting nothing, trying to fix nothing, trying to interfere with nothing. This is very much like having a big handful of elastic bands and just letting go. Let it all do what it's going to do. Something is here. There's a quiet center here. There's a stillness in the midst of the monkey mind's antics, in the midst of deepest despair, darkest depression, awful anxiety. In the midst of that is the peace that passes all understanding. You can't think your way into it, and you can't fight your way into it, and you can't seek your way into it. It's the matrix. That's the flypaper. You can't do anything to establish it, or you've lost it. You have to stop. The miracle comes quietly into the mind that stops an instant and is still. So we could call this surrender, but that makes it sound like it's something you do. It's not. This is an end of doing. That's what the surrender is. It's a cessation of seeking and resisting. The opposite of a doing, the end of doing. No judgment, no resistance, no trying to change anything. Complete non-interference. It's a looking at the whole dream, and there's no stories getting told about it. No labeling. Oh, this is bad weather. This is good weather. No, no, no. Everything is just the weather. There's nothing here labeling it. There's nothing here going, oh, I need to change the weather so I can be happy. That's not there. There's an end to that. And if that voice comes in going, no, 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 it should not be thus, do nothing with it. It's not you. It's not you. Don't try and fix thoughts thinking that will help you, because thoughts aren't you. They don't mean anything. Why would you fix something that doesn't mean anything? Do nothing. Do nothing. So you find yourself in a situation and there's adrenaline and upset and hatred and angst and you really want to murder someone. And you go, oh, all this is so I can remember who I am. Let me just stop all doing. Let the thoughts do what they're doing. They don't mean anything. Let the sin, guilt, and fear come up and blow like the tempest that it is. And whatever's happening in the world, well, that's just perfect for me to see this storm and not call it bad and not do anything with it except be here, doing nothing in the midst of it. Peacefully in the middle of it. And the storm will abate. And whatever sin, guilt, and fear that was doesn't come back. It's gone forever. Those are obstacles to the awareness of love's presence, which have now been seen by this way of looking that does nothing but look. And it's undone forever. Doesn't come back. It's a process. And the identity that you've made out of thoughts that makes you think you're a separate self, a separate ghost in a body, that identity starts to dissolve. Because the quiet center claims you back in delusion, claims you back from the matrix that's made out of thoughts. Doesn't matter if there's thoughts there, there's no identity in that. So it doesn't matter. You are the quiet center, always. The fact that you mix yourself up with thoughts is irrelevant to what you are, because you're only ever the quiet center. So make no mistake about it. A Course in Miracles says, do not set forgiveness in an earthly frame. This is not a course where you go, oh, look what the neighbor's after doing to the dog. I can't believe it. I'm going to murder him. And then you go, ah, no, I'm a wholly separate self now. So I'm going to forgive the neighbor and I'm going to just pretend I feel fabulous about that. Because I'm a holy ego, so I can feel good about that. I can feel better than the other egos. It doesn't get you out of the matrix. It doesn't undo your misidentification. This is from Workbook Lesson 62. Through your forgiveness, does the truth about yourself return to your memory? Therefore, in your forgiveness lies your salvation. Let's read that again. Through your forgiveness, does the truth about yourself return to your memory? Therefore, in your forgiveness lies your salvation. What returns? The stillness of being outside of thoughts, the equanimity that's here in the midst of whatever tempests are raging. That's who you are. You make your stand here. The tempests do all the raging they need to do. All sin, guilt, and fear in your mind needs to come up. All the ego fixations need to be seen by the quiet center until they're done. And there's just the quiet center, which is the same quiet center that's everywhere and nowhere. It's appearing as everything and unqualified by anything. That's what you are. But you think you're an ego. You think you're a separate self. You're not. And forgiveness is how you undo that misperception of yourself, who are already the light of the world, but don't know it. You're veiling the truth of what you are from yourself by your identification with thoughts. But you've never been anything other than what you are. You don't have to actually fix yourself. You have to remove the obstacles to your knowing of what you already are. You're already the swan that thinks it's an ugly duckling. The fact that you think you're an ugly duckling doesn't make it true. You're a swan. The fact that you think you're a separate self doesn't mean anything. You are the one self that's appearing as everything and everyone already. And that's wholeness and salvation. Already here. The only world that's here is the real world. And you are what's appearing as all the world. Except you're getting involved in thoughts about what the world means, what it means about me. It's nonsense. None of it means anything. And the minute you don't know you're the quiet center, and the minute you mix yourself with thoughts that are not your real thoughts, that you're not really thinking, that don't mean anything and don't exist, your suffering begins. And you're off on the by roads and high roads of the world thinking you can do something to make your pain stop. Nothing will make the pain stop. The pain is the absence of your knowing of what you are. All your lack and need and want and pain all comes from not remembering who you are and going out there trying to find an answer for what you're not doesn't work. But we all reach that point at a different stage. Critical mass of suffering. Point when we're ready to admit, I have been fooling myself all my life. I've been fooling myself. I've been fooling everyone else. All my fabulous, positive posts on Facebook, all my fabulous life on Instagram. Who was I fooling? Looking like the happy family and all the family photographs, and oh, it's fabulous. Who are we fooling? No, there's only one happiness, and that's remembering who you are. That's the purpose of forgiveness. It's got nothing to do with what one ego does for another ego. It's you realizing you're not seeing the capital S self as the truth of your brother. You're seeing a little less self, a body and an insane voice talking to itself with its ideas and its thoughts and its words. It's not your brother. It's a dream figure. It has no reality. And the only reason you think it has a reality is because you think you're a dream figure. You're not. Yes, there's a dream. What has it got to do with you? What you are, the wholeness, the oneness that you are, is appearing as the dream. But the form of the dream means nothing. Keith, Linda, Sparkle, whoever else, everyone that's here, the form of the dream means nothing. You're what's appearing as the dream. Everywhere you look is you. Quiet center. Already. But when you, the quiet center, seem to think yourself one of the images you're appearing as, you look out on the images everywhere and go, that's a good one and that's a bad one, and I need that one and I don't need that one. It's all you. It's all you. So the course's version of that is the forms, the broken pieces seem to take me nothing. For the whole is in each one, and every aspect of the Son of God is just the same as every other part. In Zen Buddhism, they would say form is emptiness, and emptiness is exactly form. You are the emptiness, the quiet center that's appearing as all form, never ceasing to be the emptiness. The full emptiness, the aware emptiness, the whole emptiness, that's the truth of who you are. And everywhere you look is that wholeness that's you. It doesn't matter what it's appearing as. It's already the wholeness that's you. The real world salvation is already here. Everything else is a delusion made out of thoughts in your mind. Forgiveness is how you get the hell out of your mind. the ego mind, the thoughts, and you look without judgment, without doing, without fighting anything, without interfering. You become quiet in the midst of the turmoil you make. And you remember who you are as the quiet center, as being. It's pure awareness, without a past or future. They're just thoughts. You are I am. And everywhere you look is the I am that you are. The being that you are is what everything is. All else is thoughts. All else is pain. So forgiveness, don't set it in an earthly plane. Forgiveness is how you remember, I'm not this separate, grasping, self-hating, self-loathing thing, trying to fool myself and everyone else, sedating myself with Netflix and alcohol and caffeine, you know, chasing after the perfect love, lying to myself, going, that's when this is going to come together. That's when this is going to work. No, you have to find the quiet center. You have to find the still point outside of thoughts and let it reveal itself to you as everything. And that's salvation. That's wholeness. Nothing needs to change with the world. They're only images. You have to see what the world is made out of, what it's an appearance of. And it's an appearance of the quiet center that you are. The emptiness that is form, the form that is emptiness. And that's wholeness and non-duality. It's the end of separateness. It's the end of suffer. So that's what forgiveness is for. And the means of that is the other way, remaining still in the midst of the turmoil you make and being able then to investigate what is this stillness that can be here in the midst of mad thoughts, in the midst of raging emotions, in the midst of the world worlding. What is the equanimity that's here? That's what forgiveness allows you to do. That's why it reminds you who you are. Because you can't judge. Course in Miracles says you've been asked not to judge. This is not to take a right off you. You cannot judge. What you are can't judge. It's not possible. It says you can only believe the ego's judgments, all of which are false. They're not your judgments. You can't judge. You're already the light of the world. You're already the capital S self that's appearing as all apparently separate selves. One self. The forms, the broken pieces seem to take mean nothing. It's all you. Unless you think you're judging, because you can't judge. Unless you get involved with the ego's judgments and go, oh, behold my judgments. They're not yours. You're not a separate self. There's no one there. There's no one there. The one who judges doesn't exist. It's a story in your mind about someone that's not there. Go looking for them. You'll find the judgments. You'll never find the one who's making the judgments because there's no one there. But what's looking is everything that's looked at. What looks without judgment, without trying to change anything, without interference, without stories. This, the quiet center that looks, is everything that's looked at. It's the purpose of forgiveness. It is the way you undo your misperception of yourself as an imaginary separate self and learn of yourself as the light of the world. Each miracle, each holy instant is the opportunity to die to a false identity and resurrect as that which is actually literally what all your brothers are already with you. Quiet center. Right. Let's throw it open for some questions. Linda, I'll let you be the maestro.
Okay, Jamie, you were first. Do you see?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Keith.
Hi, is it Janie?
Jamie, yes, very
Janie.
short question.
Fire ahead.
That word that you use, nihilism,
Nihilism.
how are you spelling that, please?
N for Nicholas.
Yeah,
I for in.
yeah,
H for Harry.
ah, yeah,
Ilism.
lovely.
Nihilism. Yeah.
Nihilism. And what was the short sort of meaning? What did it mean again?
Well, nihilism is literally, but nothing has any meaning whatsoever.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you. That was it. That was my question.
No problem. Well, to the ego, that's intolerable because the ego wants to know. It thinks it can know. It can't.
Uh-huh.
But the ego wants to know. So nihilism is intolerable to the ego. This is hell.
Right.
But actually, what's ultimately revealed is that the nothingness that's inherent in everything is you. You are the nothing that's appearing as everything and still nothing. That's the real world. So that's the closest we can be to the truth of heaven. We're literally on the doorstep to heaven with that realization. The emptiness in everything is how you find yourself. Because the emptiness in everything is you, appearing as everything and still the emptiness. So it transcends duality. You are that which is neither something nor nothing. You transcend both and incorporate both.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was it. Short and sweet.
No problem. Thank you, Janie. Where should we go next then, Linda?
Cookie.
Hi, everybody.
Hi,
Hi,
Cookie.
Keith. Hi, Keith. Wow, this is so amazing that everything you talked about today is it's right where I'm at. And after many years of seeking outside myself, I do realize my happiness is never going to come from there. That doesn't mean that I still can't do things in the dream, because the dream is still continuing until it's not, right? I mean, it's
Well,
what
doing will take care of itself, Cookie. But the important point is that when there's no doing for gain, the doing serves the whole.
Okay. Well, there's the big difference. I realize that, okay, I can still do what I do, but with no expectation that it's going to make me happy or anything like that. And um, it kind of came up right now. I'm watching my Cookies watching in the dream her old dog Zook, who's deteriorating, and it's devastating for Cookie. And but my dogs, rescuing old dogs has taught me a lot, because I go through this all the time. And what I realized a couple days ago is I'm identifying with ego when I am happy when something good happens. So it's not just the thoughts that I think are bad that are identifying with. It's making the dream real when I think that a good thought is, like say he recovers amazingly, which he's not going to, but um that's not going to make me happy either because it's still the dream,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
let's put things into perspective, because A Course in
All
Miracles
right.
puts all the levels together in the right way. You are the parent consciousness that ripped itself apart from the wholeness of God and thought itself separate and made up suffering to prove that you really were a self that could suffer, that could be sinful, guilty, and evil, and then found that intolerable, all this pain that was inside of you. And then what you did
Mhm.
was, in order to escape it, you made up a world, you made up a story about Cookie and dogs that die, so you could pretend to be Cookie and think your pain is coming from the death of dogs.
Right. Right.
Okay, so all the miracle does is it brings you back into your mind and goes, no, the pain is here because you think you're separate. Now
Right.
you're projecting it onto the world, to the emptiness dancing.
Right. Right.
And so now what you do is you say, no, now the only purpose, even though I made up the story of Cookie and the dogs as an attack on God and to keep imaginary guilt to prove God was wrong and I was right, even though I made it up that way. Now that it's made, it doesn't mean anything because it's an illusion. It doesn't have any meaning at all, but it can serve a purpose. So now the
Right.
purpose of Cookie in the world and the dogs that die and this now this has a holy purpose. Now everything's
Right.
healed wholly by its purpose, because now what you get to do is you get to look at all this pain inside without saying it's because of the dog.
Yeah.
But that's the second shield of oblivion that protects the guilt. So this is the pain of separateness, the pain of the loss of God. And it's
Mhm.
protected by the story that says this pain is because things die. Nothing dies. You made that up.
I know.
Yeah. So the miracle brings me home to my mind and goes, no, no, no. The upset is in my mind. It's not in the world. And so I sit in the midst of this pain and dis-ease and discomfort of separateness for as long as it takes. And I don't tell myself stories about it and I don't judge it and I don't call it bad emotion. It's the weather. It's today's
Yeah.
weather. And I sit in it and I don't fight it. I do nothing. I practice the other way to remember that this quiet point, this quiet center, this is the truth of God's Son.
Hmm.
And when I do, the upset is undone. When I look and I see only the quiet center as the truth of the dog, what I'm looking at is what's looking. And that's healing.
Hmm.
That's healing.
And 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 it's a process, though. It doesn't happen overnight. I just forgive it. I mean, it always comes back to forgiving my choice to identify with the ego
Yeah, but the only way
and the
back to
separate.
truth, there's no other way back to truth other than forgiveness, because only that restores what is here that cannot judge.
So I'm forgiving the thoughts that I'm having. No, what am I forgiving? My identifying with
All of it.
as separate. Pardon me?
Yeah. Yeah. All of it. All of it. The world that you've made up is worlding exactly as you worlded it to world. Okay.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's happening exactly as it is. Now, what you do is you don't judge it. How do you do that? You
Right.
change its
Right.
purpose. So
Mhm.
now the dog dying, that's not bad. That is exactly how things should be for you to
Mhm.
remember the truth of who you are and see that as the
Okay.
same truth the dog is.
Okay. Oh, yeah, right, right. Okay.
That's the purpose. That's how you escape from the matrix. Is the whole matrix is made out of holiness. But when you get involved in the images, including thoughts that are putting meanings on the images, you don't know that you are the fish surrounded by ocean looking for water.
Mhm.
You're busy getting involved with waves, going, oh, if I use these waves the right way, I might find water. If I look at these waves differently, I might find water. You know, if I pit these
Right.
waves against these waves, I might find water. And there's only water.
So well, I
Wholeness
don't want
is
to say,
appearing. Wholeness is appearing as the bad thoughts and the good thoughts. Everything's made out of gold. The good thoughts, the bad thoughts, the good things, the bad things, the births, the deaths, all of it's made out of gold. You're gold. Everything's made out of the awareness that you are. So nothing that the awareness is appearing as means anything because what's longed for is what's appearing as everything, the good stuff and the bad stuff. And it's you.
so knowing that moving forward in the dream, I'm extending love.
Well, that's how you extend love. So everything is just a split off part of yourself that doesn't know it's what's appearing as everything. It thinks it's a separate self. It's in terrible pain.
Mhm.
And whenever there is the thought that I am a separate self, there's terrible pain, and there is either
Mhm.
calling out for love, in which case, it will be expressed by special love, special hate, grasping, grievances. Um, okay, so that's going to be what happens when there is a belief in a separate self. There's going to be seeking and resisting and grasping and grievances and upsets and chasing after happiness and all the rest of it. And the alternative then is knowing what you are. And the minute you know what you are, it doesn't matter what the split off parts of yourself think they are. You see the truth of them. That's how you answer their call for love.
Okay. Okay.
Anyone that thinks they're
Okay.
separate is calling out for love, no matter what they're doing. They're calling out for love because they don't know
Mhm.
that wholeness is
Mhm.
already here. And the
Okay.
way you answer that call for love is you see that the wholeness is already what they are. And it's the same wholeness you are.
Okay.
But
Okay.
it's the quiet center. It's outside of the concepts. Salvation can be seen as nothing more than the escape from concepts. So
Okay.
you come with wholly empty hands unto your God, free of all judgment, um, and know the quiet center, and you see. And it's not that the quiet center here sees the quiet center there. Literally, this becomes that everywhere you look is the quiet center that's you. There isn't a dualistic, the idea that there's a me here and you there, that's a thought. Once that starts collapsing, once the perceptual filters start falling, when thought loses its hypnotic power over us and we don't believe them anymore, then literally what I'm looking at is what's looking. There isn't a quiet center here seeing the quiet center there. There is literally the quiet center there, which is the truth of what I am, as it is everywhere. Everything else is a thought.
Mm.
Everything else is just this filter of thoughts that hides the real world, where one wholeness is appearing as things that don't matter and it's already wholeness. So the Course talks about the perfect equality of the healer and the patient or the healee. And what it says is that what the dog is is exactly what you are. What you're looking at is what's looking.
Mm.
Everything else is just thoughts. So you use forgiveness to get the hell out of thought identification and find this still point outside of thoughts by doing nothing, by the other way, by remaining quiet in the midst of the turmoil you make. And this stillness
Mm.
here, that's the stillness that's everywhere. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you, Keith.
Only forgiveness and non-judgment can take you home here because there's no
Okay.
judgment here. There's no judgment here.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I mean, I'm doing nothing and feeling whatever. I don't even know
Yeah.
how to say it.
But in the
Yeah.
midst of doing nothing, you have to turn around and investigate. What is this? What is this nothing in the midst of all the apparent somethings? What is this place where there is looking, but no thoughts about what's looked at, no judgments about what's looked at? So,
Okay.
we're doing forgiveness, and each time we're turning around and tasting. So there's looking without judgment, without doing, without interfering, without fixing, without anything. And each time we turn around and taste, what is this outside of thoughts?
Okay.
What is this still point? What is this
Okay.
quiet center? Um,
Okay.
and as we touch in here, there's the knowing that this is the truth of everything.
Okay.
The Course tells us the miracle establishes your identity where it's not recognized, and that your identity is shared. It's not a separate self. The only thing that's true about you is what's equally true about everything you look at. Everything you think is different about you than what you look at is illusion.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Cookie.
Thank you, Keith.
Pleasure. Linda, what should we do next?
Okay, Anna Lethea.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Hi. We can.
All right. So, as we're in our wholeness and recognizing our being and seeing the illusion of the world in front of us, seeing it for the projection that it is, seeing through the illusion, and as we're still in the world and dealing with friends and family who are not involved in this type of work, and they share with us their stories, and their heartaches. How exactly do we respond to that? I mean, we're certainly not saying, well, that that's just an illusion, or
No, that
no,
wouldn't be
no,
kind.
none of that.
No,
Do we just rely on our inner guidance, the guidance of our own inner stillness in our responses?
you do not share their dreams.
And so,
No
what
matter
does a
what their no
response,
matter what their dreams are,
right?
you're looking and seeing the changelessness as the truth of them. It's the only way to remember it's the truth of you. If you're looking at them and seeing their brokenness, that's your own brokenness projected out. So what you have to do is you have to understand that as you interact with people, whatever sadness or brokenness or whatever, that's yours. Okay. And it's getting projected onto them. And now instead of you undoing your own brokenness, you're going, oh, I'm going to fix these people out here. There's no one broken.
Mm-hmm.
Because the one here who suffers doesn't exist. But if you think you are that, you look out and you see one's suffering everywhere. As A Course in Miracles says, you have attacked them. You've attacked wholeness, but only because you attacked yourself first. So the way in which we help is we come back to the quiet center. We get out of thoughts through forgiveness. It brings me home to the quiet center, the still point, which is the truth of who I am. I am that which looks without judgment. Doesn't matter what thoughts and feelings and emotions are doing. If they're coming up, that's great. They'll get undone by the quiet center. And this quiet center is the quiet center in the other person. That's your focus. That's your miracle. Now, what comes from that is the extension of the miracle. That's not important at all. It'll take care of itself. In other words, whatever is a helpful, loving, kind thing to say or do will come. But that's not where your investment is. Your investment is that when other people are suffering, it's like a child that thinks there's monsters in the closet. They think they're sick. They think that, they've lost everything. They think whatever the drama is, right? That's like a child going, there's a monster in the closet, there's a monster in the closet, there's a monster in the closet, okay? And the kind thing to do is go in and go, no, there's no monster. Look, let's just look in the closet. You see, there's no monster. We're not lecturing the child about whether there's monsters or not monsters. We're going, look, there's no monster. So we do what's kind. Okay, but we don't believe in monsters. If the other person is believing in monsters and you believe in monsters, well, you're useless. Okay? The only person that's helpful to someone who believes in monsters is the one that knows there isn't any. This person can afford to be kind and do what's helpful for someone that thinks there's monsters. But there's no monsters. There's only love. There's only oneness. It's only wholeness. It's appearing as monsters, but it's still wholeness. And it's you. And it's what everyone already is. So you come back to the quiet center that you are, outside of being mixed with thoughts, and you know it's the truth of everyone. Everything is already fine. And you don't have to worry about what is kind or useful or helpful. That will automatically follow from the miracle. And there's no greater explanation of that process than lesson 109. We ask for rest today and quietness, unshaken by the world's appearances. So the world's appearances can be whatever they want. We ask for peace and stillness in the midst of all the turmoil born of clashing dreams, including our own. Peace in the midst of these thoughts that don't exist and mean nothing. Peace in the midst of the sin, guilt, and fear that's coming up to be undone in my mind. Peace in the midst of whatever the hell is going on in the world. We ask for safety and happiness, although we seem to look on danger and sorrow. And we have the thought that will answer our asking with what we request. I rest in God. This thought will bring you the rest and quiet, peace and stillness, and the safety and the happiness you seek. This safety and happiness that you've sought in all the wrong things. I rest in God. Now, in this moment, no matter what's going on. The other way, remaining quiet in the midst of the turmoil you make. This thought has the power to wake the sleeping truth in you, whose vision sees beyond appearances to the same truth in everyone and everything there is. Here is the end of suffering for all the world. And everyone who ever came and yet will come to linger for a while. Here is the thought in which the Son of God is born again into the stillness to recognize himself. I rest in God, completely undismayed. This thought will carry you through storms and strife. Thought storms, ego storms, emotion storms, sin, guilt, and fear storms, family storms. Completely undismayed, this thought will carry you through storms and strife, past misery and pain, past loss and death, and onward to the certainty of God. There's no suffering it cannot heal. There is no problem that it cannot solve, and no appearance but will turn to truth before the eyes of you who rest in God. This is the day of peace. You rest in God. And while the world is torn by winds of hate, your rest remains completely undisturbed. Yours is the rest of truth. Appearances cannot intrude on you. You call to all to join you in your rest, and they will hear and come to you because you rest in God. They will not hear another voice than yours because you gave your voice to God. And now you rest in Him. And let Him speak through you. In Him, you've no cares and concerns, burdens, no anxiety, no pain, no fear, no future, no past regrets. In timelessness, you rest, while time goes by without its touch upon you. For your rest can never change in any way at all. You rest today. And as you close your eyes, sink into stillness. So I think that's a beautiful explanation of what this is. The rest in you, the emptiness in you, the quiet center in you automatically calls anyone associated with you to their rest in the same place. Automatically. Before you do anything. Because there's nothing to do.
Right.
But from this resting in God and knowing you have remembered the rest for everyone. That's why the sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. There's no such thing as separateness. It's made out of thoughts. All I have to do is get the hell out of thoughts. Come home here to the quiet center. And when you touch in here and you know the Son of God, you've remembered for everyone. This is what everyone is. All is well. And from this knowing that all is well, as a side effect of that, you'll also know what to say or not say that's helpful and loving and kind in the situation and can be accepted without fear by the person. But you don't believe in monsters. You believe in the rest. So thank you for that.
Beautiful response. Thank you.
Ah, my pleasure. Linda, where should we go next?
Okay, Marcia, but just so you know, we've got Marcia, 3 more hands and 2 questions in the box.
Well, let's draw a line under Jessica. And so yeah, Marcia.
Hi. I'll try to be short. I was just going to, in the course he talks about the happy dream and the real world. So as you're speaking to us and we're absorbing this, and as we're resting in God, my understanding was that the real world is when your ego is completely done. But the happy dream is when you are, I guess you still have an ego, but you're noticing more and more that you rest in God. Would that be correct?
Well, I wouldn't make a distinction between the two. I mean, I would say the real world is the happy dream. But we certainly we have glimpses. At one stage, I would have thought that your job is to go home to the stillness and you observe the ego until the ego is completely dismantled. And then this witnessing presence also falls away. And then there is the real world, which is the doorstep to heaven outside consciousness. So I thought that was a linear thing that happened in time. That would have been my understanding of this process.
Yeah,
that's no longer my understanding. Because at this point in my practice, there can be sustained periods of no thoughts. And when there's no thoughts, there's no separate self here. So there's just what is appearing as everything. There's not much you can say about that. It's not really something, because the mind will twist it no matter what I say. But that doesn't mean I will still then find myself imagining I'm a person.
Mhm.
Okay, and then I use the miracle of going back and looking at that with no judgment. And then the thoughts fall away. And then the witnessing presence falls away. And now there's no one here. And there's just what's appearing as everything. So for me, then, what I've realized is that the real world is, and then it does actually say that in the course. It says awareness can be trained more and more to experience the real world.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
so so no, the real world, you'll have glimpses of that. And the course actually does even use the word glimpses. Let me see if I can quickly come up with that. Um, Vision will come to you at first in glimpses. Now, vision, vision really is that everything is what's looking. That's what vision is. So vision will come to you at first in glimpses, but they will be enough to show you what is given you who see your brother sinless. Now, in other words, nothing you're looking at, there's no stories getting told. So you know the quiet center that you are and you see it everywhere. That's what it's saying.
Mhm.
Truth is restored to you through your desire as it was lost to you through your desire for something else. So the course is acknowledging here that the real world and vision, at first of all, it's going to be brief glimpses. Um, and as you practice coming home to the quiet center, each time you touch home here, outside of thoughts, to this stillness, this place of no judgment, it becomes more and more like home.
Sure. Yeah.
And it gets to a point then where you can't, even though you'll still find yourself imagining yourself to be a separate self, um, the dis-ease, the discomfort of it immediately alerts you that you don't want to be here, and so you let illusions fall away and go back to the quiet center. It's not even true to say you go back to the quiet center. You are the quiet center. It's just
Right,
that there's
right,
a
right, right.
delusion of something else. But each
Yeah,
time you
yeah.
use forgiveness to undo the misidentification as an individual.
So I was thinking of it linearly as you were speaking
Yes.
about, but it is more of a spiral
Yeah.
because the happy dream, I guess, is having those glimpses of the real world, even though you haven't really arrived yet. And something you said last week was we are already there, even though we think we're not.
Yes, that's the happy
You know,
dream, is that one son
we,
of God is appearing as births and suffering and sickness and old age and death, and nothing is being born or dying. One wholeness is appearing as the whole lot. That's God's son. That's the truth of everyone. That's the
okay,
happy dream.
yeah,
So, whatever, again, we ask for peace in the midst of the storms. That's the happy dream, is that it
yeah.
doesn't matter what the storms are. There's an equanimity that's here always in the present moment. If I let the past go and if I drop all interest in the future, you see,
Okay,
that's what the course says. The course says, the atonement can be equated with a total escape from the past and a complete lack of interest in the future. Heaven is here. There's nowhere else. Heaven is now. There's no other time. So it's in this space where there's the end of seeking and resisting, where there is this being with whatever is present. There's an equanimity, there's a felt sense of being that comes, which is the truth of who you are and the truth of everyone. So thanks for that, Marcia. And so
really
that's the happy dream. It doesn't matter what happens in the dream now because nothing intrudes on the rest.
great. I just wanted to give an example quickly of
Mhm.
being in that state. I had an 18-year-old dachshund, speaking of dogs, and I knew he was going to die sooner or later. Well, one night I went out, we have a pool, and I went out in the dark onto the lanai, and I saw this blob in the water, and I went, oh my God, it was my dog. He had drowned. And it was amazing. I picked him up out of the water. I just said, oh, Augie. And I picked him up and laid him out. I even tried to do a little resuscitation, which I didn't know what I was, but he was dead. So I brought him in, I wrapped him in a towel, and I just sat there with them, not crying, not in agony, just knowing that he had passed. And there is no death. And it's easy to say that, but to actually know that it was just his little body that left us.
Yeah.
And he's still here and he's part of me. So
He
anyway,
is he is what you are. Yeah.
yeah,
Course in
yeah,
Miracles says what dies was never living in reality.
yeah. So I
So
just wanted to say that for Cookie, who was going through the
yes, lovely.
thing with
Because
her dog.
one capital S self, one wholeness, one Son of God is appearing as puppies being born and appearing as dogs dying of old age. And it's the same self that's appearing as babies being born and babies dying and grass growing and grass getting mown. It's all the changing. The truth of it is the changelessness, which is God's one Son everywhere. And that's wholeness, and that's the salvation that's already here, unless we're involved with thoughts. So we need to get the hell out of thoughts, undo whatever sin, guilt, and fear that we're trying to protect with projection. And all the time we're getting a clearer and clearer view of what's here, resting in God as the truth of who I am. And then it's seen everywhere. It's the truth of all illusions. It's the truth of all images. So the images are all being born and suffering and dying. And it doesn't mean anything because one light is appearing as the whole thing, and it's you. Now, that doesn't mean we spiritually bypass the fact that whilst we witness this, suffering is going to come up in our mind. We're not bypassing that. That is the purpose of the illusions, is that we sit with the suffering and don't say it's because of the world. So the gift of a loved one dying, the gift of a dog dying, the gift of anything that's happening in life, a marriage breakdown, a relationship breakup, bad health, whatever it is, the gift it brings is the sin, guilt, and fear that can be seen and undone here. That's the only useful thing to do with the world that means nothing, is to have it undo suffering by going home to the quiet center, and the quiet center will dissolve the suffering. And all the time, it's removing the blocks to the awareness of who you truly are. And so that just shines brighter and brighter. And there's a deeper and deeper realization of the emptiness that's appearing as everything. Thanks, Marcia.
Thank you.
So, Linda, where should we go next?
Okay, Tracy.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi. My question is, I'm low on the rung of this process, but I feel like I'm getting it. But if I think about others and the awareness being in others, it feels like that's a big jump for me. And I almost kind of shut it down in my mind. I wondered if I should just keep focusing on doing the process of forgiveness for myself and allow the others to come with the process, or if there are some tips you could give me to help.
Yes. The mistake here is to have subtly bought, drank your own Kool-Aid, that you are a separate self, and that you, the separate self, are in possession of the quiet center. But it's hard for you, the separate self, to see other separate selves as the quiet center. That's the trap. Okay.
Yeah.
You're not a separate self. Okay.
Yeah.
So there is the quiet center, but there's nobody there going, I am the quiet center, right? You are the quiet center. You're not a separate self that owns the quiet center, that can go into the quiet center, that can call on the quiet center, that can identify with the quiet center. No, you are the quiet center. There's nothing else. Now, so really you can't see another person clearly until you clearly know yourself. So the purpose of somebody else being there, which is just an illusion, because it's all the self, one self is appearing as everyone. The only purpose of it being there is so you can look and go, I'm not seeing the self that's appearing as all the universe there. I'm seeing a separate self. Why? Because I think I'm a separate self. Why do I think I'm a separate self? Because I'm believing thoughts and thinking I'm thinking them. So let me look on all the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that are going on here and do nothing in the midst of it. Let me be quiet in the midst of it. So thoughts and emotions, they're not going to get relaxed. You relax. You, the one that's there behind them all. You, the one that precedes every single thought and emotion that arises and that is here after they dissolve. You, the one that's not arriving with emotions and dissolving with emotions. You, the one who is the knower of all that arises and touched by none of it. You know yourself as this. And now you look out and you see, if you're not a separate self made out of thoughts, okay, and the delusion that you're the one thinking them, if that's not what you are, that can't be what anyone else is. You will see the world as you see yourself. If you see yourself as a body and an insane voice talking to itself, you can only see the world as bodies and insane voices talking. But when you undo your misidentification as an ego and come home to the quiet center you are, the being, the presence, the awareness that's here behind all thoughts and emotions, behind whatever storms are raging, when you come home here, then this is behind whatever storms seem to be raging out there. That's the truth of what everyone else is. So I just think maybe you're trying to run before you can walk in the sense that you haven't quite understood that you're not the one thinking thoughts. There's nobody thinking them, and they mean nothing. You are the quiet center, and behind that, you are what eternally rests in God. That's the truth of who you are. So just keep using forgiveness to go, okay, so there's anxiety and judgment in the wrong mind, but what does that have to do with the mind that looks without judgment? And taste it. And do that all during the day. Or ask yourself, what am I? And listen to what thoughts say and go, they're just thoughts. What am I when there's no thinking going on behind all thoughts? The one who witnesses all thoughts, but isn't having thoughts about them. What am I? So you spend your whole day practicing resting in God. And from here, you can know the truth of everyone is this same something and nothing that rests in God. Does that make any sense, Tracy?
Yes.
Cool. Cool.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Linda, where should we go next?
Okay, Susan, you're up.
Hi,
Hi,
Keith.
Susan.
So in a state of, not a state of, but when experiencing the peace, the rest, I would say rest of just being, of just being now, of just beingness. I look I see things in the dream world that I see in that same state of just, it's all just beingness that's appearing there. I'm not going to do a good job explaining what I'm trying to ask.
It gets tricky. I struggle with it as well.
So, like, that is, it seems like the experience of experience of seeing self in seeing beingness, just beingness, the rest of that, the restful state of that, the unified experience of that leads to like a flow of everything connected through the basis of that. I'm using the wrong words, but like a tree, a rock, a fire, a catastrophe, all of these things are just beingness now. And the question I have is, like, the dream, is that like a form of entertainment for the bland restfulness of just being?
No. No. There is the Eastern notion, which has great merit, but it needs to be understood in context of Layla, which is playing in duality. In other words, oneself is appearing as everything, the victims and the victimizers and the attackers and the attacked and the murderers and the murdered, and the observer and the observed. And this is the play of Leela, which is true, that would be the real world. Um, in terms of the images are the effect of guilt. So in truth, cause and effect cannot be separate. They are one. So literally, this world is the thoughts of separateness, sin, guilt, and fear projected out.
To distract from the guilt, to distract one, to create that space. Okay.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's the second shield. It is. It's to protect the actual separateness, sin, guilt, and fear. Okay, because now it's seen outside and not within where it is. You see, so so the thing is, the world. The Course says the world rose from the guilt to keep the guilt hidden. You see, the guilt that's here, because now it seems like it's out there, but there's no out there because it's all my mind. And so, what we actually have is a world which is the effect of guilt, but there's no such thing as guilt. Therefore, the world has no cause and no meaning. And so we're looking at the world, but we're saying, but it has no cause. So in the real world, you're looking at images that have no cause and no meaning. Because guilt was never there. Separateness was never there. So the images are just happening. It's not that awareness is doing them. They're happening for no reason. And that is salvation. There is no separateness, sin, guilt, or fear.
So
the
could I ask?
images don't mean anything.
Okay, so I had an experience where I was at a stoplight and all of a sudden I was able to see myself sitting in my car, and I looked over and there was like a strip little mini mall like collection of stores, and they just looked like there was no affect to any of it. It just looked like a cardboard cutout, like on a movie set, where they just put the facade up, but there's nothing behind the saloon door. And it was a real felt experience of nothingness, like the absolute strip away of any sense of solidity to form.
Yeah, but that will be automatic. Anytime there is no thought, that will be automatic. All the perceptual filters are just a big house of cards based on thought. So the minute there's no thought, the minute there's a gap here in the thought stream, the real world will make itself known. Now, it doesn't even require that there be absolutely no thought. It requires only that there's no investment in thought. There's no identity in it. And so anytime that happens, the perceptual filters of here and there, and perceptual filters of, good and bad and right and that's all gone. And now there's only what is. There is only emptiness as form and form as emptiness. So that will be the mechanism. That's what happens. And that's why sometimes, quite a lot of times, people, when they have a near, let's not use that term, when they come close to dying, there's a situation where the thoughts just can't deal with it and they just shut down. And suddenly there's this oneness experience. Or it can happen if you're seeing somewhere stunning in nature for the very first time. So there's no previous thoughts to label it and make a barrier between you and it. And so the mind is just stunned into silence for a moment. And again, there's this sense that all is well and all is one. And and for some people, that's going to be holding their child for the first time, or for other people. So we actually do have this experience of the real world all the time, but we don't recognize it. And then when we think back on it, we insert that there was a me here during the experience, but there wasn't. The reason the experience was superlative is because there was no you there.
Yes, that's just it. I could see my body over, but it wasn't me that
There
I am.
wasn't a you. There wasn't a
Yeah.
you. That's triggering for the ego. Let me say it this way. There is no self apart from what is everything.
Right.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm on a magic carpet. That's what it feels like. I'm riding a magic carpet.
Well, that sounds like a thought. What I would say
It totally
is,
is a thought. You're right.
what I would say is, there's no self apart from all it is. There is only what is appearing as everything. That's automatic the minute there's no thoughts, or the minute there's no identification with thoughts, that they're just what's happening, but I'm not identifying that. They're not dragging me into the unconsciousness of thinking I'm the thinker of them. So I am.
And so in my words, I describe that as I see the thoughts, but I don't take them seriously. I see them, and it's like,
yeah. So
there
that's how
that
you
is.
don't identify with them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you,
They're
Keith.
just what's happening. Like everything else is
Yep.
just what's happening. But if there's nothing here judging it, then there is no thoughts.
Right.
And then if there's no thoughts, there cannot be a separate self because it's made out of thoughts, and the thought someone's thinking them. So the minute thought stops, there's nothing here, but there is what's
Okay.
appearing everywhere. Because the separate self doesn't actually exist. Of Course in Miracles says the ego is only an idea, not a fact. It's never actually there. It's just an idea that there's a self here, but there's no one here. You're only ever the quiet center that's appearing everywhere.
It's just that house of cards of thought.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
And the minute
Thank you.
thoughts stop, the minute they stop, or the minute there's absolutely no investment in them, then separateness can't stand as an illusion anymore. It requires thoughts to prop it up. But without thoughts, there's no separateness. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you.
So is it just Jessica to do then, Linda?
Yes, it's just
Perfect. Jessica, you have the floor.
Hi, great to see you and hear everything. And my question has to do with various types of pain. And we've talked before, you and I, in coaching sessions, and also I've heard you say to other people on in this group that, taking medication for pain, totally appropriate, go ahead and do that. My question has to do with all the other forms of pain that you mentioned earlier, that we medicate with things like Netflix and, cigarettes or alcohol or whatever it might be. And you know that I mean, maybe you don't remember, but I've had quite a lot of challenges with physical pain. And it, there are times that I can practice remembering that it's not the pain that's causing my distress. It's the sin, guilt, and fear that's causing the distress. The pain is just some manifestation that is created by, we don't need to get into how, that makes me project the sin, guilt, and fear onto the pain and then think the pain is the problem. So I guess my question is, I've had for the past month some pain that started out very intense. It's now minor, but I still am taking some medication for the pain. And when I feel the pain, I practice the course's, awareness of, this is not really about the body. This is about the sin, guilt, and fear. The sin, guilt, and fear was there before. It's not created by the pain, all that stuff. When I want to watch TV because I'm tired of trying to negotiate this world, this illusion, and I don't want to think about it anymore, and I don't want to, I know it's because I haven't reached the level where I'm in the peace and the silence. If I was there, I wouldn't need to, or think I need to watch TV or do some sort of distracting thing. But my question is, what about these different kinds of pain, and what's the balance? Like, when do I mean, I feel like I have a certain amount, a certain understanding for me about the balance of how much physical pain I'm willing to deal with without medicating it, and the other type of pain too. But what is the core? Yeah, what do you think the balance
Okay.
is?
The first thing, if any spiritual practice causes you to feel guilty about what you're doing it wrong. The spiritual practice of A Course in Miracles is about undoing guilt, not feeling guilty because you're not doing the course properly. You see, so you can't do the course wrong if you're undoing guilt. So the only thing you're ever doing is looking without guilt. So the idea then that, oh, I medicate myself with television, am I not doing it good? Am I guilty of that? You want to let that go. I love the way Ken would answer this. Ken would say, listen, there's a movie playing. All right. There's a body. It has pains. It has thoughts about the pains. It has feelings about the pains. It goes to the doctor about the pains. The doctor gives it treatment for the pains. The treatment works or it doesn't work. The body goes on and it lives or it dies. And you're in the cinema going, but what does that have to do with the one who looks? And the body goes and it medicates itself with Netflix. And you're going, but what does that have to do with what's in the audience? You see? So everything that's happening in the appearance is the movie, and that includes thoughts and feelings. That's the matrix. Okay. What you are is outside the matrix. That's the truth of who you are. That's the quiet center. And from here, you see that the whole matrix is made out of the quiet center. So don't go giving yourself a hard time because you medicate yourself with Netflix. We all do that, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is what we want to learn is we want to find the equilibrium that's here. You know, the Course says you don't know the difference between pleasure and pain, and you can't have pleasure without pain. And you don't realize they're the same. You don't realize your pleasure and your pain is the same. Okay, so what we're looking to do is we're looking to find the equanimity that's here in the midst of pleasure or pain that transcends both. That's what we're looking for. And so what we're learning to do then is to remain quiet in the midst of the turmoil that we make. What we've programmed bodies to do, what thoughts are saying about it, what feelings are saying about it. We remain quiet in the midst of that, and we look without doing, without judging, without interference. And this is what brings us to this still point outside the matrix. And then from here, we see that there's nothing to pleasure except an appearance of this still point. There's nothing to pain except an appearance of this still point. So the name of the game is always total and absolute forgiveness and non-judgment. Total and absolute forgiveness and non-judgment. You definitely, what we want to do with pain, like everything else, is switch its purpose and switch the body's purpose. So a very important place in the, let's see if we can dig it out. If I can do it quickly, I will. I won't waste loads of time searching. Okay, this is from chapter 28, section 7, and it's paragraph 3. Yet who can build his home upon a straw and count it as a shelter from the wind? The body can be made a home like this. In other words, built on straw. Because it lacks foundation in the truth, because there's no body. And you're not about a body. And yet, because it does, it can be seen as not your home, but merely as an aid to help you reach the home where God abides. With this purpose is the body healed, which doesn't mean pain stops, the body changes its condition. But now, if I'm no longer seeing the body as my identity, as my home, and I now understand it to be a forgiveness device. Whatever it's doing, its sole purpose is for me to see this suffering that was in my mind and have it be undone. For that purpose, the body isn't sick. The body isn't other than it should be. To finish it out, it is not used to witness to the dream of separation and disease. In other words, you can't be sick and diseased, no matter what the condition of the body is. But the body can only really be said to be sick if it is my identity and home and it's no longer fit for purpose. Then I would say the body is sick. However, if the body is not my home and its only purpose is to show me the suffering that was already in my mind, now the body is not sick. The body is fit for purpose, which is that it's showing me the suffering in my mind that can now be healed.
So the question I have is, when I take Tylenol for the pain and the pain goes away, I am less likely to be thinking about the letting go and the forgiveness and the lack of judgment and the remembering who I am and all that stuff. Instead, I'm going to go about my business feeling like, oh, I feel good now. And so in some ways, it seems like not taking the medication serves the purpose of what you were just saying better.
Yeah, but you're dancing dangerously close to magic, which says the secret of my salvation is something that I do in the world with the body. It's not. It's falling still in the midst of whatever's going on and not judging. You
Okay.
see? So try not to go down that magic route, which is like something I do in the world will bring me salvation. It won't. Only, only, only the course is looking, which means looking without doing anything, without having opinions on what you're looking at and not labeling it. So this is simply noticing the thoughts of unfairness and victimhood and innocent victim and why me and not everyone else and blah 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 blah. It's witness to that. It is witness to the fact that there is sensations happening and there is suffering arising. And it's to allow the sensations to bring the suffering out of the unconscious so it can be seen in the light of this looking that does nothing. And so the suffering can be undone. So it's, again, the way out of the matrix is that we look on everything without deciding the weather is good or the weather is bad, or this weather is preferable or this weather is not preferable. You know, ultimately, pain is something that comes to all of us in the end. You know, it may not be my turn right now. You know, it will come. It comes for everyone. Because look, we need, there's a certain type of sin, guilt, and fear that we have projected out as sick bodies. So we have to have that happen in the dream to get back to what's buried in the unconscious, what we made the world to hide, which is the suffering that's here.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I would say salvation is not taking Tylenol, and salvation is not taking Tylenol. So either of those, you've gone off track. You've gone into magic rather than the miracle. But the miracle is that there's an equanimity that's here in the midst of pleasure and in the midst of pain. And it's findable only through complete non-resistance, non-judgment,
Mm-hmm. And the
non-interference.
non-judgment of whether I take the Tylenol or not.
Yeah, because that's just what's apparently happening. It doesn't mean anything. If you decide that means something, you've made that up. Everything is for forgiveness because it doesn't have any meaning of its own. Nothing means anything, which is ultimately salvation, even though the ego thinks it's nihilism, which it
Right.
is for the ego.
Thank you. Thank you.
In Buddhism, they have the story of the two spears. So in the dream, there is the sin, guilt, and fear that we've projected out as pain and suffering in the dream. It doesn't arise on behalf of anyone, but it's there in the dream. So no one actually suffers. There's nobody to suffer. We made up sin, guilt, and fear to prove there was a separate self that could be sinful, guilty, and fearful, but that self was never there. So even though there's sin, guilt, and fear in the dream, in other words, even if there's pain in the body and you go, can I find the pain? You will. And if you say, but can I find the one who's in pain? You'll find no one. You see, so yes, there's pain, but it doesn't arise on behalf of anyone. Because ultimately there's nothing that can be sicker in pain. And that's why the Course says, what suffers is not part of me. What is in pain is but illusion in my mind. There may be pain there, but there's nobody there to be in pain. So I am what is witness to it. But there's no pain or suffering in what witnesses ever. So there is suffering in the dream, but it arises on behalf of no one. But the Buddhists have this idea that there's the two spheres, so pain will come. And that's the first sphere. And that's the dream, that's the script. So that's how it is. But the second sphere, so the first sphere is not optional. The second sphere is optional, and the second sphere is suffering. Because pain doesn't cause suffering. Only a grievance with sensations causes suffering. So pain is what is, but it doesn't mean anything. Suffering is, it should not be thus.
Okay, so I have one question about that, because I just took a transatlantic flight and I was really uncomfortable physically in it. It's like a sardine. And as I was feeling this discomfort and trying to get comfortable, I kept saying, I was saying, I was forgiving it. I kept forgiving it. And so what you said earlier on at the beginning about every time I'm able to let go of judgment, that will, so you're saying that every time I did that, I was releasing, something was being dropped?
Yeah. Well, yes.
I forget what the words were.
Whenever you're witness to sin, guilt, and fear coming up in your mind without judgment, it will be undone by non-judgment. Forgiveness is the most powerful thing in the dream. It will ultimately dismantle the entire dream from within. And so anything that is seen with non-judgment, with forgiveness, ultimately, whatever identity you had lost to it is restored to you. The minute you forgive something, it's seen to be empty, and your identity is freed up from that. And additionally, in terms of sin, guilt, and fear in the mind, anytime it's seen by non-judgment, by equanimity, by total equanimity, it can't stand. It gets collapsed from the inside. So
That's
yes,
beautiful.
yeah, yeah. That's why no matter what meaning of tragedy we've made up for the condition of the body or what happens with bodies in the world, because they don't mean anything, but regardless of that, there is a blessing in everything that we get to look at the suffering in the mind that is buried, but that wants to be projected onto something outside. So that projection process pulls it out of the unconscious, and now we get to heal it. So we're never, even though we're talking about the real world today and the fact that it's one self appearing as birth and suffering and death, and all is well because it's all the one self. Nothing's actually getting harmed in the making of this movie of separateness, because there's one actor playing all the parts. Even though we're saying that, we're not saying that you spiritually bypass that there's loads of suffering going on in here whilst the movie that means nothing is happening. So whatever is happening in the movie, the only purpose of it is that the mind will vomit up its repressed suffering and try to project it onto the emptiness dancing. And it's not about stopping that happening. It's about being witness to this and going, aha, let me let go of the second shield of oblivion. I don't judge the world anymore. Nothing in the world is good or bad or right or wrong. Everything is for forgiveness. That frees me up. There's no judgment anymore for the world. It is what is. But now I sit with whatever suffering is here, and allow it to get collapsed from the forgiveness inside of it. And that's what forgiveness is.
Great.
So so in the Buddhist thing, the first one is pain, and the second spear is suffering. So in other words, you may not have, okay, if the leg is broken, there's pain there. Okay, we may not have, say over that, but we do have a say over whether we go resisting it or not, whether we choose to have a grievance with it or not. And if we switch the purpose of everything, no matter what's going on, the only purpose that it has is for me to remember who I am through forgiveness. So it doesn't matter if it's tragedy or disability or bad health or a relationship breakup or falling out with your family, or it doesn't matter what happens. You don't get to judge it as a bad thing.
Right.
Because calling it a bad thing, you made that up. These are just images that mean nothing. You made that up, and that's chaos. And the Course says, no, throw all the chaos out. It doesn't matter what's happening. It's for forgiveness. Now judgment's gone. Allow all things to be exactly as they are, because their only purpose is for you to end your suffering by remembering who you are. And that's what the Course is teaching us. And each time we go, yeah, but, yeah, but, I do think this thing will be the source of my happiness. Well, we're just marching ourselves towards the guillotine again. And we'll do that over and over and over again until we're ready to make that genuine exhortation to the Holy Spirit that says, there must be another way. And now I'm ready. I'm ready to admit I don't know anything. Everything I've done has failed. So that's the point of readiness. And this sounds maybe harsh. I've said on occasion, listen, if you think life's going pretty good and I just need to tweak a few things and it's going to be fabulous, and I want to learn the Course and do the Course, well, listen, I'm going to say, look, learn all you can about the Course, so you have it for when you realize that the world can't make you happy, that the whole thing collapses, and that you've lost all hope. Because really, nobody does the Course until then. No one does the Course until then, which is fine. That's all things working together for good. Learn about the metaphysics and entertain yourself with it and go, that's a cool little concept there. Yeah, do that. But it's really only when you're ready to admit when it's too painful for you to be an ego anymore. That's when you're really ready to do the Course. And at that point, forget everything you learned and become quiet in the midst of the turmoil you make. So until then, learn all you can, do that. But when you're really ready, forget everything you've learned and become quiet in the midst of the turmoil you make. That's what I would say. That's when you're genuinely ready to do the Course in Miracles. Not just to fight with people in the forums about what it means and try and convert them and, save everyone. And, that's just distraction. That's when you're not ready to do a Course in Miracles. When you're ready to do a Course in Miracles, you become quiet in the midst of the turmoil that you make. That's it. The time of learning is done. It's doing, or non-doing, as the case may be. Cool. Guys, thank you very much for your attention. I hope this was some way helpful. We will catch up in the Facebook group during the week, and we shall do it all again next week. Thanks, guys.